Good morning and welcome to another exciting time. It's time for business and it's Business 360. My name is Blyden Okem. In Business 360 today, we'll look at some of the top stories in the world of business. But key on the breaking news is that UK economy returns to growth in August. We begin from there. The British economy grew by 0.2% in August, matching market estimates while shifting from a revised 0.6% contraction in July. Services output expanded by 0.4%, even though consumer-facing services contracted by 0.6%. Meanwhile, the production and construction sectors continued to decline in Britain. On the foreign scene, the United Auto Workers UAW union has expanded its ongoing strike by shuttling down Ford's biggest plants. The UAW said 8,700 workers walked out of the truck plant in Kentucky in response to Ford refusing to move further in contract bargaining. It is a sharp escalation of a strike against Ford, General Motors and Stellantis, which began last month. The UAW is pressuring the car makers to grant higher pay and make other improvements in new labor agreements. It is the first in the union's 88-year history to target the Detroit 3 automakers, which collectively employ more than 140,000 UAW members at the same time. The UAW President Sean Fan commented regarding this. Let's find out more.
We begin tonight with the surprise expansion of the United Auto Workers strike. Tonight, hitting Ford Motor Company's biggest plant. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carolyn Clifford. In one move, the union more than doubled the number of workers on a duty truck strategy of keeping the Detroit 3 wounded for months through reputational damage and industrial chaos. Well, tonight, a Wayne State professor says the talks may be at a crossroads.
Also talking about businesses in the country. The World Bank, the globe's top anti-poverty institution, has said that recent cuts to the UK foreign aid budget caused real pain. The bank added it wanted the UK back at higher levels of funding. The UK government was until recently the biggest single donor to the bank's fund for the poorest countries in the world. Since 2020, ministers have cut back on aid temporarily until Britain's public finances are back in shape. The UK has halved its funding to the World Bank's International Development Association Fund to £500 million a year. Still on the World Bank Group. The World Bank Group President, Ajay Banga, has said that interest rates are staying higher for longer and can be a complicated event in many ways for global economy. He spoke yesterday at the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in Marrakech, Morocco. Let's find out more from Ajay Banga.
There's no doubt that inflation has begun to come down. I do think that interest rates will stay higher for longer. That can be a complicated event in many ways, both for investments as well as for people who over the years had got used to a lower interest rate environment. I think those are the plus and minuses there. I believe that wars are completely and extremely challenging for central banks who were trying to find their way out of a very difficult situation to a relative.
During a press conference on the occasion of the IMF's annual meeting with the World Bank in Marrakech, the director of the body's Middle East and Central Asia department insisted that the institution picked up speed to respond to challenges countries are facing with a shock-prone world. According to the IMF, between 2020 and today, the fund has provided about $80 billion through programs, emergency financing, and SDR allocation potential debts. 6 countries have also had arrangement approved under the newly launched Resilience and Sustainability Facility, including, most recently, for Morocco. Let's find out more regarding this.
IMF is also stepping up. Between 2020 and today, the fund has provided about $80 billion through programs, emergency financing, and SDR allocation. 6 countries have also had arrangements approved under the newly launched Resilience and Sustainability Facility, including most recently for
numbers suggest that there is a debt sustainability challenge. That's when you want to discuss debt restructuring issues, and that's when you enter, those kind of discussions.
6. Containment of violence in the Middle East. Amid global rises in energy prices and other commodities due to recent wars, the United Nations Secretary General Guterres is pleading that the violence in Israel and Gaza remains contained, with no further military escalation into other areas in the region. Many analysts also say that a spillover of this crisis to other areas in the Middle East could be disastrous for global markets. Let's hear more from the UN Secretary General.
Some remarks and then I will do the briefing after that.
I've been closely following dramatic events in Israel and Gaza. I will never forget the images of this supercharged cycle of violence and horror. We must avoid spillover of the conflict. I am concerned about the recent exchange of fire along the Blue Line and recent reported attacks from southern Lebanon. I appeal to all parties and those who have an influence over those parties to avoid any further escalation and spillover. I call for the immediate release of all Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Civilians must be protected at all times. International humanitarian law must be respected and upheld. About 220,000 Palestinians are now sheltered in 92 UNRWA facilities across Gaza. UN premises and all hospitals, schools and clinics must never be targeted. UN staff are working around the clock to support the people of Gaza, and I deeply regret that some of my colleagues have already paid the ultimate price.
In Africa, Moody's has lowered the credit rating of 5 Egyptian banks, including the largest private bank. This downgrade comes in the wake of Moody's decision to lower the sovereign rating of Egypt due to increasing concerns about the country's ability to manage its growing debts. Moody's also expressed concerns about the asset quality, earnings, and capital reserves of these banks. Moody's specifically adjusted the credit rating of the National Bank of Egypt, Bank Misr, the Bank do Cairo, as well as the privately owned Commercial International Bank, COMICA, shifting them from B3 to CAA1. It also downgraded the Bank of Alexandria, a subsidiary of Italy's Intesa Sao Paulo, to B3 from B2, according to reports. In Nigeria, then, the Nigerian federal government, through the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, has announced its plan to reduce the current number of taxes, which stands at about 62, down to less than 10. The president is determined to boost the country's tax revenue from the current 11% of the gross domestic product GDP to 18% within a 3-year time frame. Nigeria's tax revenue as a share of GDP is a third of the 34% average for members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Still in the country, Nigeria, as the onslaught against oil theft continued in the Niger Delta region, Nigeria's crude oil output rose to 1.35 million barrels per day in September 2023, as the country pumped its highest volume of crude oil since this year. The figures obtained from the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission showed that the country's output in September was about 14% higher, which was a 165,429 barrels per day increase when compared to the 1.181 million barrels per day produced in August this year. On a year-on-year analysis, the figure is 412,000 barrels per day higher than what was produced in September 2022. And it marks for good reading from Nigeria. Meanwhile, Nigerian oil firms have acquired about 26 oil mining licenses in the Niger Delta Basin area in the last decade. This was revealed by Executive Secretary, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, Engineer Simbi Wobote, at the 2023 Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association Energy and Labour Summit in Abuja. According to him, some of the divestments currently on the cards included those planned by Shell and ExxonMobil to sell oil and gas assets worth billions of dollars, in addition to Eni's announcement in September of an agreement with Owando plc for the sale of NAOC interest in 6 onshore blocks and Opai gas power plants in Delta State. He emphasized that divestments of oil assets are not necessarily negative, rather, they present an avenue for the local capacity and capabilities that have been developed through local content implementation to be brought to bear in the upstream sector. Now to MAN reports. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, says soaring inflation, which has occasioned rising costs of production, goods and services, is a threat to the country's economy. Francis Mishole, the president of MAN, disclosed this in a statement on Wednesday during the association's pre-annual general meeting press conference in Lagos. Mishole lamented that in the last 6 months, the country's manufacturing sector had continued to shrink due to rising costs of production, and it tends to bite everybody. We'll go on a quick break. When we return, we'll be looking at global statistics around the world and most importantly in Ghana. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Business 360 and my name is Blyden Okem. And now we look at economic statistics in the world, but we'll center attention on Ghana. Ghana has witnessed a drop in its inflation rate, reaching its lowest point in a year this September. Annual inflation eased to 38.1% from 40.1% in August. Price growth softened for both food at 49.4% against 51.9% in August, and non-food products 29.3% against previous standing of 30.9%, thanks to a more stable cedi. On a monthly basis, consumer prices surged by 1.9% in September after decreasing by 0.2% in the prior month. This decline offers the central bank the opportunity to maintain the current lending rates in the coming months. It would be a good time to move to the charts indicating inflation rates in China, what the charts are understandings from China. Well, according to Ghana Statistical Service, inflation stood at 40.4% as of October 2022 and began to go higher and higher to 54.1 and 53.6% by January, but the slowdown started amid that deal with IMF and had dropped to 41.2% in April 2023 before going slightly higher upward to 43.1% in July 2023 and a slowdown to 38.1%, indicating improvements in the cost of commodities, the cost of commodities going down in Ghana amid a stronger Ghanaian cedi. And now to the markets. Let's talk about global markets, beginning with commodities, the energy market first. All rebound on OPEC Plus leaders' commitments. Brent crude futures edged up above $86 per barrel today, bouncing back from a drop of more than 2% in the previous session after Saudi Arabia and Russia showed they were working together to support the oil market, while investors keep a close watch on unfolding events in Israel and Gaza. Saudi Arabia's energy minister and Russia's deputy prime minister talked on Russian TV and said they were committed to keeping the oil market stable by taking action in advance. Meanwhile, industry data showed that U.S. crude inventories increased by a huge 12.94 million barrels last week, exceeding forecasts for a 1.3 million barrels build. Let's move to the market itself and see what the prices of the energy commodities would be, beginning with the energy market, and afterwards we'll look at the prices of industrial commodities, metal and agricultural commodities. The energy market first. Well, crude price, U.S. crude, which is the West Texas Intermediate crude, our current price for it is $84 per barrel, upward by 0.98 point, 1.18% appreciation For Brent, which is Nigeria's price benchmark, the current price in the market this morning is $86 per barrel, upward by 0.868 points, a 1.01% appreciation. But the volatility level in this market is quite low. Natural gas a little here, a little there. Gasoline, same story. Heating oil, similar story. Downward by 0.4 points this morning. The industrial market, the price of bitumen, cobalt, and the rest. Bitumen prices downward by 52 points after recent rises. At 3,958 Chinese yuan per ton is the price of bitumen. For cobalt, no significant difference in the market. Lead prices downward also by 7.45 points. 2,116 US dollars per ton is the price of lead, a negative 0.35% decline. Aluminium gaining 3 points. Tin prices upward by 205 points, a 0.83% appreciation, while zinc gains this morning by 4 points. The metal market, the price of gold, silver, and the rest. For gold market, it's upward this morning by 7.67 points. 1,881 US dollars per ounce is the price of gold. Silver price similarly at 22 US dollars per ounce, gaining 0.122 points, a 0.56% appreciation. Copper is a little here, a little there. Steel price is downward by 4 points this morning. 3,587 Chinese yuan per ton is the price of steel. Iron ore 1.5 points gained this morning. And the agricultural commodities. The agricultural commodities indicates soybeans and the rest, but we're waiting to see the action that comes with these commodities. But the market outlook has been sophisticated one way or the other, and soybeans prices upward by 4.25 points, wheat price gaining 1.04, and lumber 6.5 point upward. Palm oil gaining 86 points, 3,637 Malaysian ringgit per ton is the price of palm oil. Looking at the foreign exchange market, we'll have a view from Ira Epstein. As parity for the euro and the US dollar is in order. The euro can seem to reverse its downward trajectory against the dollar, and it's been the conversation in recent weeks. And the big question is, will this crucial currency pay return to parity, a level last seen in 2002? Let's find out more regarding this.
What about the euro currency? This market has been breaking as of recent. The question in many minds, will it go to parity? I have my doubts that it's going another 5% lower. I happen to think that the 105 area will represent an area of support. I question whether Ms. Lagarde and the bank wants to continue with interest rates going higher, especially if the Fed can get into a pause mode. And that becomes the real question. What does the Fed do November 1st? If they hold interest rates, will rates as a whole go higher elsewhere, or does the dollar start topping out and the euro gets a chance to rebound?
Now to the FX insights. While British pound finds strength after weeks of losses, the British pound has found some upside momentum. Jim Laurier says the movement in the pound can be explained in one of two ways. Let's have insights from Jim Laurier regarding the British pound movement.
Mid-July through October 4th, the British pound lost over 8% of its value against the dollar. Now, the narrative was pretty simple. Markets were becoming comfortable with the higher for longer rate story in the U.S. and that this was going to be supportive of the dollar. Now, during that same time period, U.S. 10-year yields went from 3.8% to 4.8%. Now, there's been a change, though, over the last week as the British pound has been on a streak of 6 straight days of gains that has it up over 2% a week. Now, the most interesting part of the recent strength is that it seemed to accelerate in the wake of the news of tensions erupting in the Middle East. Now, normally, intensified geopolitical risk causes reflexive buying of the U.S. dollar and a flight to quality. Now, the movement of the pound can be explained in one of two ways. Perhaps the excessive short market position created the potential for a short covering rally. Some analysts, however, have suggested that the situation in the Middle East could cause ramped up spending from Washington on defense and on aid packages, and this is significant in that the market was already...
Now looking at FX updates, the Russian ruble appreciates by 2.69% based on currency outlook this morning. The biggest losers are the New Zealand dollar at a negative 0.33%, while the top gainers this morning are the Russian ruble, 2.69%. Quickly, let's move to the market and see what the values of these currency pairs are. The euro against the US dollar first, and afterwards Naira's perspective in the market. The euro against the US dollar market is still within the 1.06 point mark, gaining slightly this morning, a 0.04% appreciation, while the pound against the US dollar soon slight decline this morning, a 0.09% decline. Quickly, let's look at Naira's perspective in the market. Nigeria's currency Naira against the US dollar. A US dollar Naira is 759 Naira 49 kobo equals $1. But at the close of yesterday's market, the euro against the Naira stood at 808 Naira per euro, a drop of 0.0534 points in favor of the Naira against the euro. For the pounds to Naira, our current price is 938 Naira equaling £1. Again, for the pound over the Naira, 0.8164 points. And now to the parallel market, what the prices in the parallel market are this morning, a Naira against the majors in the parallel market. The outlook of these markets have shown diverse fortunes in recent week after Naira had rallied back to 900 plus to $1. It's fast shoot again to 1,040 Naira equaling $1 at the buying rate in the black market and selling rate 1,020 Naira to the dollar. For the pounds to Naira, it's 1,275 Naira to £1 at buying rate and selling rate 1,260 Naira. The euro to Naira stands at 1,080 Naira to a euro at the buying rate and selling rate 1,060 Naira. Quickly to the digital coins, commodities. Let's see what the prices of these currencies are in the cryptocurrency market. Bitcoin gaining 33 points after yesterday's slump. Current price for Bitcoin is $26,743 US. Ether dropping 19.22 points this morning, and $1,544 US is the price of one Ether. Binance slightly downward, Cardano downward this morning, Solana downward. Looking at the global stock market as Asian stocks track Wall Street higher. While Asian equity market rose today, extending a rally and tracking gains on Wall Street overnight amid growing expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve is done raising interest rates. Those moves came even after minutes of the Fed's last meeting showed our U.S. policymakers said rates should remain elevated for some time to bring inflation down, while U.S. producer inflation data came in hotter than anticipated in September. Investors now look ahead to U.S. consumer inflation figures today for further guidance. While shares in Australia, Japan, South Korea and Hong Kong all advance, and mainland China stocks also gain following news that a state fund increased stake in the country's biggest bank. While it's been a similar picture for African stock market and the Nigerian stock market this morning, it's been that of mixed fortune. But here we draw the curtain in today's edition of Business 360. Thank you for being a part of it. My name is Blyden Ukem.